Happy Sabbath, everyone. Thank you all for joining in again. So, before we could start, let's all sing few songs. And for the first song, let's sing Part in the Blood. Power in the blood, power in the blood. Evil of victory win. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Will you be free from your passion and pride? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Now for a cleansing to Calvary's side. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Are you washed in the blood, in the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless and your white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless, are you white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb.
For the next song, we'll sing these two choruses together. Light of the world and Here I Am to Worship.
Light of the world, you step down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see. that'll bless your heart. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the things I've made it, but it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. King of endless worth, no one could express how much you deserve. Though I'm weak and poor, all I have is yours, every single breath. I'll bring you more than a song, for the song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it, but it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus.
It's all about you, Jesus. We remember you whenever we sing this song. For the next song, let's sing two choruses again. Come, now is the time to worship, followed by the chorus, open the eyes of my heart.
Now is the time to worship. Now is the time. next song, let's sing Happiness is the Lord. Happiness is to know the Savior, living a life within His favor, having a change in my behavior. Happiness is the Lord. Happiness is the new creation, Jesus and me, close relation, having a part in His salvation. Happiness is the Lord. Real joy is mine, no matter if the teardrops start. I found a secret, is Jesus in my heart. Happiness is to be forgiven, living a life that's worth the living, taking a drive that leads to heaven. Happiness is the Lord. Real joy is mine, no matter if the teardrops start. I found a secret, is Jesus in my heart. Happiness is to be forgiven, living a life that's worth the living, taking a trip that leads to heaven. Happiness is the Lord. Happiness is the Lord. Happiness is the Lord.
For the next song, we will sing this song, Lord, I lift your name on high.
I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross. My debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. Praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. In my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross. My debts to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high.
Hi everyone, we welcome you for joining us again this evening to worship on with us. For today's meditation, I would just like to draw your attention to one question which always raised in our heads. The question was, how, when did the apostles were persecuted, how they were treated when they were found out to be the followers of Christ. There are some scenes, some things happening in this present world which can be related to that, to the time of persecution. And it's not late, it's not too far for us to realize that what's happening in the world also happened long time back with the apostles. We have a small clip, we have a small video which talks about what happened with them, how did it happen with them, how the persecution started with the apostles. So take your time, please sit back And please look at the video.
What happened to the apostles after Jesus' death? I'm your host, Bob Riles, and this is a question we examine today on The Thoughtful Soul. While the fate of the apostles may not seem like an important question, their action after Jesus' death actually helps us establish the historical truth behind Jesus' resurrection. To better examine the importance of this question, we have to go back to the time shortly following the death of Jesus Christ. The year is around 33 A.D. The religious leader, Jesus, who had been heralded as a hero by the city of Jerusalem just days before, was suddenly put to death by Roman authorities. His crucifixion followed the earlier beheading of Jesus' forerunner, John the Baptist. During his trial and crucifixion, his closest followers stayed away in fear for their own safety. One of his inner circle, Peter, even denied that he knew Jesus. After his death, 2 of the disciples left town, while the others hid behind locked doors in fear that they could be next. When several of the disciples did finally head out, it was to return to their previous occupation of fishing. Fast forward a few weeks, and suddenly you find a group of disciples committing to spread the message that not only is Jesus God's Son, but he rose from the dead. They preach the resurrection message not just in Jerusalem, but out to Rome and even as far as India and North Africa, while facing significant persecution and, in some cases, even martyrdom. So is their martyrdom really all that unusual? After all, people die all the time for causes they believe in, like religion or country. What makes these Christian martyrs so unique? The early Christian martyrs are very different in one respect. While people die for a cause they truly believe in, people don't willingly suffer persecution and death for a cause they know to be a blatant lie, especially when the truth could easily spare them suffering and death. It quickly becomes evident that the one thing that could turn these scared fugitives into bold preachers in such a short time is the belief that they actually saw a risen Jesus. While their behavior doesn't unequivocally prove Jesus' resurrection, it does provide a significant number of eyewitnesses willing to back up their testimony with their lives. This would count as overwhelming evidence in a court of law today. That is why their fate is so important. Did the apostles face persecution and martyrdom for their actions after Jesus' death? If we can establish they really did suffer for their beliefs and message, then it makes their testimony very compelling. So, what happened to Jesus' apostles? Well, first we can confirm that they, like many early Christians, would have faced serious persecution. This should come as no surprise, as Jesus often told his disciples they would ultimately suffer on his behalf. The New Testament tells accounts of beatings, imprisonments, and stoning of early followers. The Apostle Paul tells of his role in persecuting the early church before his conversion.
On the authority of the chief priests, I put many of the saints in prison, and when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. Many a time I went from one synagogue to another to have them punished. In my obsession against them, I even went to foreign cities to persecute them.
In addition to the Bible, early historians such as Josephus and Tacitus chronicled episodes of Christian persecution. Cornelius Tacitus was a Roman senator and historian, and his works, the Annals and Histories, tell us much of what we know about the reigns of the emperors Tiberius, Claudius, and Nero. Tacitus tells us how, in 64 A.D., Nero was suspected of starting a fire that destroyed 3/4 of Rome, but he used the Christians as scapegoats. Tacitus writes,
Therefore, to eliminate this rumor, he falsely produced defendants and inflicted the most extraordinary punishments upon those whom, hated for their crimes, the people called Christians. A great multitude was convicted, not so much on the charge of setting fire, as on hatred of the human race. Mockeries were added to their death, so that wrapped in the skins of wild animals, they might be torn to pieces by the dogs, or nailed to crosses they were burned to death, to furnish light at night when day had ended.
It wasn't just Nero who blamed and punished Christians for the ills of society. As the 2nd century writer Tertullian writes,
If the Tiber rises as high as the city walls, if the Nile does not send its waters up over the fields, if the heavens give no rain, If there is an earthquake, if there is a famine or pestilence, straight away the cry is, "Away with the Christians to the lion."
In reading through the 1st and 2nd century accounts, it becomes clear that the apostles certainly knew they were taking their message to hostile groups that wanted them dead. So the specter of martyrdom loomed over their every movement. Let's take a look at 4 apostles where there is compelling evidence that these early followers actually paid for their beliefs with their lives. Peter was Jesus' guy, a key member of the inner circle. Yet Peter disavowed knowledge of Jesus during Jesus' trial in fear for his own safety. Then, after believing he saw the risen Jesus, the book of Acts tells us how Peter preaches the first Christian sermon and is arrested multiple times by Jewish authorities. Peter's persecution and untimely martyrdom is confirmed by the 1st century writer Clement of Rome, who states,
Peter, because of unjust jealousy, bore up under the hardships not just once or twice, but many times. And having thus borne his witness, he went to the place of glory that he deserved.
Peter's martyrdom is also alluded to by a number of other 2nd century writers, including Ignatius, Dionysius of Corinth, Irenaeus, Tertullian, and in the books of the Acts of Peter and the Apocalypse of Peter. In studying the writings of that era, it quickly becomes clear that there was almost universal acceptance of the persecution and martyrdom of Peter. Paul was the most unlikely of all early disciples. A lifelong Jew and Roman citizen, he led the charge to hunt down and kill the early Christians, fearing they could lead the Jewish nation astray and bring down the wrath of God. The book of Acts, chapter 8, tells us that he was there giving approval at the stoning of Stephen, and that Paul, then known as Saul,
began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off men and women and put them in prison.
One of his travels, however, he encountered the resurrected Jesus and immediately converts to Christianity. This dramatic conversion led Paul to become one of the boldest evangelists in early Christianity, with Paul ultimately authoring nearly half of the books in the New Testament. Certainly Paul knew the fate he would be facing after his conversion. After all, he led the charge for the imprisonment and death of scores of early Christians, and suffer he did. In all, Paul recounts,
5 times I received at the hands of the Jews 40 lashes less 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 more times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from my own people, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure.
So what could cause this radical shift in belief and willingness to suffer all manners of pain and imprisonment? By far the most logical explanation is that Paul truly believed he'd encountered the risen Christ. As with Peter, the martyrdom of Paul is confirmed in the early writings, including Clement of Rome, Ignatius, and Polycarp's letter to the Philippians. James was the brother of Jesus and ultimately became a leader in the church in Jerusalem. Yet in spite of growing up with Jesus, the Gospels give indications that James did not always believe that his brother was actually the Son of God. It was not until after Jesus' resurrection appearance to James that we find him in the inner circle of the apostles. As other apostles fanned out to share the gospel across the Roman Empire, James stayed in Jerusalem to lead the local church. It was this conversion and his proclamation of a resurrected Jesus that would lead to his martyrdom. James's ultimate fate comes to us from the 1st century Jewish historian Josephus, who wrote, Ananus assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James, and some of his companions. And when he had formed an accusation against them as breakers of the law, he delivered them to be stoned. So what changed belief about his brother from skeptic to martyr? Only a sincere belief that James encountered his brother, risen from the dead, could have led to this cataclysmic shift in belief. Finally, let's look at James, son of Zebedee. He was one of the first apostles called by Jesus, and Jesus actually predicted his martyrdom in the book of Mark. This prophecy was fulfilled in the book of Acts, which tells us, It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. James, son of Zebedee, was one of the first apostles to be martyred. The tradition of his martyrdom is also confirmed by a number of early extra-biblical authors, including Clement of Alexandria and Eusebius. James also went from hiding from the authorities in a locked room to becoming an early Christian martyr after what he truly believed were encounters with the risen Jesus. Martyrdom traditions exist for all of Jesus' other apostles, though some appear later than the 2nd century, and others have multiple traditions that appear to be in conflict. Many do contain consistent facts that point to an underlying truth about their death, even if some of the later elements are embellished. In any event, the widespread persecution of the early church and the killing of many early leaders, including Jesus, John the Baptist, Stephen, and James, the brother of Jesus, made it very clear that the apostles knew that they were signing up for a life of certain persecution and likely death, even if some of the details are lost to antiquity. So we have seen a group of scared fugitives become bold evangelists. A man changed his belief about his brother's true nature after his death, and a chief prosecutor become a leading defender, and all willingly defend their decisions with their lives. The only logical conclusion is that they actually believed they saw Jesus risen from the dead. These eyewitness accounts, attested with their own blood, provide some of the strongest evidence that the resurrection really did occur.
I hope you have been blessed by what you have seen now, and it's really something for us to learn, something for us to take in, and something for us to be ready for what's going to happen in the future. So I pray and hope that this small video clip, this small message has been an inspiration to you or made you ready for what's going to come in the future. To conclude our service, our worship, I request a blessing to offer the closing prayer.
Shall we all pray? Our merciful Father, we thank Thee for the blessed Sabbath day that You have given us. Thank Thee for all the guidance and protection that You have given us throughout the past day. Lord, You have been with us through our work, through our difficulties, and You have brought us here as a small group to praise Your name. Lord, we thank Thee for the guidance, protection, and health and strength throughout this pandemic time. Lord, help us to be safer and more closer to You. Help us to know more about You so that we could be examples for others through our lives, Lord. Lord, as we enter into darker stars, be with us and guide us, give us good night's slumber, and give us good health and strength and knowledge to take wise decisions in our life, to be an example to You, Lord. Lord, as Thy Son comes in the clouds of heaven, help us to be a part in Thy eternal kingdom and glorify Your name, Lord. Be with us and guide us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.